Hello everyone, it's Anna, and for today we'll be learning how to add animations to our web pages using CSS and JavaScript. We're gonna learn different ways on how to add animations like transitions or using keyframes or even using JavaScript. And if you like this video, go on and give this a like down below, and you can also give us suggestions of what videos to do next in the comments. And if you like our videos, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and also click that bell notification to stay posted with any new videos coming up. So let's get started. Okay, so for today, we'll be discussing how to add animations to websites. And adding animations to web pages can significantly enhance user experience. So it makes our interfaces feel more dynamic and responsive. So with JavaScript and together with CSS, it provides a robust platform for creating sophisticated animations. And there are actually a couple of different ways on how you can add animations to your websites. So let's open up our Visual Studio Code. And I also have here a JavaScript folder, practice folder already created in my desktop. And I'll just open that up in Visual Studio Code because this will be the IDE or integrated development environment we'll be using for this tutorial. So I already have it opened right here. And I also have my JavaScript practice folder open in my VS Code. And inside this, I'll just create my first file, which is the index.html. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and create another file for the styles.css. And I'll also create one more file for the JavaScript that says script.js. Okay, so let's go back to our index.html, and I'll just create a boilerplate for my HTML right here by typing doc and press tab. So there we go. This is the boilerplate for our HTML document, and I'll just change the title to adding animations to websites. Okay. And in this head, I'll also add in a link to my CSS right here. So I'm looking for a style sheet, and I'll just use the reference, which is the file name of my styles.css. And inside the body, I'll also connect my script with a script tag. And this should also have the source of script.js. Finally, I'm going to add here a button with a class of button, and it's just going to say hover me. Okay, now that we got our HTML set up, we can open it in our live server. And if you don't have live server installed, just go to your extensions and search up live server. And the first one that pops up should be the right one. Just go ahead and install it. I already have it installed in my machine or in my VS Code extension. I don't have to install it again. Okay, and once you have that installed, just go to your Explorer, right-click on index.html, and open with live server. And it should open up your browser with your code right there. I'll just put side so we can have side by side of the code and the live preview. I'm also going to close the Explorer. Okay, so now let's actually style and add some animations to this button right here. I'll go to my styles.css and I'll select the button by selecting the class. And we do that by putting in a dot as our class selector and the name of the class, which is button. Okay, and now let's set the background color of this one to be blue. You'll see it in real time change. I'm also going to change the color of the text to be white because we do have a dark blue background right there, and we want to actually see the text. And finally, we're going to change the font size to be a little bit bigger, around 40 pixels, so it's big like that. Okay. Well, now I'm going to add in a change in the background color when we hover over this button. So I'm going to use a pseudo class hover. So I'll select the button first and use a colon to select the pseudo class of hover. And whenever we hover over this button, it's going to change the background color to red. Okay, so let's actually see if that works. As you see, our hover button is changing color whenever we hover over it. But it's so snappy, like there is no smooth transition from blue to red there. So we're actually going to add that right here and type in transition, background color. So we're applying the transition whenever we are changing the background color, and that transition will occur in 3.3 and it's going to ease. And So now let's see the difference. Now when I hover over the button, that the blue is suddenly changing to red. So here's another example of adding transitions to make animations with our web pages. So I'll go to my HTML file and I'll just create a card right here. So what I'll do with this card is it's actually going to expand whenever we click on it. And this will have the class of card. And I'm also going to give it an onClick attribute so that whenever we click on this, it will do something. And it will select itself. So this div right here, whenever we click, we will add a class. Or rather, we will toggle a class. So it will add that class and remove that class whenever we click on this div. And that class will be the expanded class. Okay? And now I'll go to my styles.css and I'll style.card first so that we can actually see that in our web page. So I'll select the card class and I'm first going to change the height to be 200 pixels. And I'm also going to change the margin of it. And we will add a margin on the top of this so that it has a little bit of space between that hover me button to the content itself. And I'm also going to add a border to this one of 2 pixels and solid so that it wraps around in a solid line throughout the whole div and it will be just black. And finally, I'm going to add a transition. And this transition will apply whenever we change the height. And it's going to apply for 0.5 seconds. And as well, similar to the button, it will ease. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to create the expanded class for the card. So we're going to select the card first. And then we're also going to put here a dot and expanded. So this will only happen to the card that has the expanded class. And what it's going to change is just the height. So from 200 pixels, it will now be 400 pixels. Okay, so now let's see what happens. There we go. You can see that this card right here is expanding and retracting like we wanted. I'm actually going to label this div right here to have a click me instruction. So now I'm also going to change that to be 40 pixels. I'm going to add the font size to be 40 pixels right here so that it's bigger. And again, let's test that out. Whenever we click this, it will expand smoothly like that. So another way we can add animations is through CSS keyframe animations. So right now, I'll show you how to use those keyframes. So right here, I'll actually create a new element, which is a div, with a class of element. Okay, and this is going to be fading in and fading out. So let's say fading in right here. And now inside our CSS, let's go ahead and style that. So I'll just use the @keyframes right here, and I'll specify this. I'll give this animation a name, which is fade in. So you can set the name to anything, maybe jump if a character is jumping, or fade out if you want to fade out, and some open and close curly braces. And we're going to set where it's from what point it's going to start with, and it's going to start with the opacity of 0. And what point or what is the ending animation, which is it's going to fade into an opacity of 1, which means from not visible, slowly fading into view with this opacity 1. And then finally, I'm going to select the div that we created with the class of element. So let's use a dot for looking for a class, and then element. And we're going to set an animation for this one. So animation, and then we'll call the keyframes that we created, which is fade in, the name of our keyframes. And we're going to put how many seconds it will animate. So it will just animate for 1 second. And of course, we'll ease that in. Okay, so I'll actually give this a background color as well so we can see the difference. I'll give this a background color of red. And I'll also give this a margin, or the space at the top, of 10 pixels. There we go. As you can see, I'll also make the color of the text white so that we can see it clearly, and the font size to be 40 pixels. Okay, as you can see now that div is fading in like for 1 second when this loads. So let me refresh the page so you can see it. There we go. It's slowly fading in, and you can customize it whatever you want. Maybe you can even do a fade out. So let's say here, this will be a fade out instead of a fade in. And from 1, opacity of 1, it's going to go to the opacity of 0. So just the opposite. And let's call this fade out. And let's see how that's going to do. There we go. Now it's fading away. So that's how you can use keyframes to add your animations. We can also add in our animations with the help of JavaScript. So I'll show you that. I'll be adding a div right here with the ID of box. And this div will simply say box inside it.
Okay.
And I'm also going to style that in CSS. So to select an ID in CSS, we use the hashtag or the £, and you're going to choose the name of the ID that you're looking for. And in this case, we have the box ID. So for this box, we will add in a width of 100 pixels, as well as the height of 100 pixels. We're also going to change the background color of this to be blue, or sky blue, rather. And we're also going to change the font size of this to be 40 pixels. I'm also going to add a margin at the top so that it has some space from the previous div. So 10 pixels would be nice. Okay. And now I'm going to add a transition to this one. Okay, transition. And I wanted to have that transition when we transform the box. And transform is actually when you move the box from point A to point B. And let's say this transition will occur over 2 seconds. Okay, now I can go into my script and actually use a DOM manipulation here, or DOM, which stands for Document Object Model Manipulation. And we're going to get the box from our HTML so that we can add some events to this and event listeners to the box itself. So I'll write in a const to store our div, which is the box. And we're also going to sign up the document first. So document here refers to the whole HTML document. And inside that document, we're going to get an element by ID. And the ID we're looking for would be box. Okay. Now that I have that that element in my JavaScript, I can select it and add an event listener to it. So event listeners are just a way for us to tell JavaScript to wait for an event to happen. So it's like we're saying to JavaScript, hey, wait for this event to happen, or listen for this event to happen. And once it does, do this. So I'll show you. We're going to put in some parentheses right here. And inside this add event listener method, we are actually putting in 2 arguments. The first argument will be what event we're listening for. So that event would be a click on the box. And the second argument would be what we would do, or what JavaScript would do once that event happens. So for this one, I'm going to put in a function, and more specifically an arrow function to happen. So that is an arrow with an equals and an angle bracket resembling an arrow, and some curly braces to open up the code block for our arrow function. And for this one, it's just going to simply transform the box. And we can do that by selecting the box and then selecting the style, because we're going to add some style to the box. And the specific style will be transform. Okay. And the value of that transform would be translate x 100 pixels. Okay. So what this does right now is once we click on the box, it's going to move on the x-axis. That's why we're using translate x, and a positive 100 pixels. So that means it's going to move to the right. Because when it comes to the x-axis, the positive would be to the right and the negative would be to the left. Okay, let's actually see if this works. I'll click on the box. And there we go. You can see it's slowly moving or transitioning from this area to the 100 pixels to the right. So what if we make it to negative 100? And let's wait for that. If I try clicking this, this will go to the left. Okay, and just like we combined the transition from CSS with the JavaScript, we can also combine the keyframes from the CSS to be triggered by our JavaScript. So I'll go ahead in my index.html and I'll create another box here, div with the ID of box2. Oops, it's outside. Okay, and this will say box2. Okay, and we're going to style that now in our CSS. And we're actually just going to copy this first one and paste it down below. But of course, this one's going to be for the box2. And we'll actually change a few things. We'll keep the width and the height the same, but we'll change the color so that we have that difference to be pink. And finally, we're going to remove this transition for now. And we're going to add something in here, which is the animation. But before we can add that, let's declare the keyframes that we will be putting in that animation. So let's put in the @ symbol and then keyframes. And then we'll name this as a slide. Slide keyframe animation. And first, of course, we're going to put it where it's from. So it's going to transform from translate x. And this will just start from 0. So its original point. And now we can put in where it's going to be by the end of the animation, which is it's also going to transform still on the x-axis, so translate x, but 150 pixels. So this is essentially going to function the same as the first one, but we're using keyframes for this one. And now we're going to put in the animation styling here. And first, we put in the animation or the keyframes we want to apply to this animation, which is the slide. And then it's going to happen over 2 seconds. And we're going to set it as infinite. Okay? And it will alternate. So now you can see that this is moving alternately from left to right infinitely. But we can actually, before we start that animation, we can add in a script so that it only triggers when we click on it. So again, we're going to get that box2 with DOM manipulation. So let's say box2 here, and we're going to get the document like we did before, and get element by ID. And of course, this is going to find box2. And similar to the first box, we're going to add an event listener to this one. And it's also going to listen for a click. Oops. Okay. And for the second one, we're also going to put an arrow function here. There we go. And this will put in the box2. And we're going to change the style of that. And we're going to change the animation play state. Okay. So what this means is we're changing the animation to maybe start running or pause or start running. So that is the state of the animation, whether it will pause or it will continue. And what we'll be putting in here is a ternary operator, which is it's checking whether it's equals to this. And if not, it's going to do another thing. So let me show you. We're going to get the box style dot animation play state. And we're going to check with an equality operator with if it is currently running. And if it's currently running, we're going to pause it. Okay? But if it's not, we're going to continue running. So if it's running currently and we click it, it's going to pause. But if it's currently paused and not running, it's going to continue to run. So let's try that out. Let's click on box2. Oops, that's why it's not working. I accidentally called box instead of box2 right here. Okay, so we'll see what happens. And I'll click on it. Oh, and now I see that it should be paused, not pause. Okay, so now let's try. I'll click on the box2. And now you can see it's pausing whenever it stopped. Or what point it is on the animation. And if I click again, it's going to start running again. I'll pause again and run it, pause again. There we go. So that's how we can use some variety as well. Maybe you're making a game wherein there are animations so that they can pause those animations with a click. Okay, so now let's actually apply what we've learned about animation or practical example. And for this one, we'll be creating a simple loading spinner using CSS animations and JavaScript. So I'll go ahead in my HTML file, and I'm just going to put in a div with a class of spinner. So if there, and it has a class of spinner. And inside the spinner, I'm just going to put in an image. So image, and the source of this will be an image address that I copied there. And you can use an image that you want as your spinner, as your loading spinner. And now it shows up here. And as you can see, it's really, really big right now. So we're actually going to make it a little bit smaller by styling that in our in my styles of CSS. And I'm going to select the spinner as first. And we're going to be using a descendant selector here because I actually just want to select the image inside the spinner div. So I'm going to put an image here. And what this is doing is it's selecting the parent first of the div spinner, and I'm going to select the image child inside of that div. And inside here, I'm going to set the width of this to be 100 pixels, plus the height. Okay, and I'm also going to add a margin at the top so it doesn't have, it's not so close to the box too. 10 pixels would be fine. And I'm also going to add in animation here. But before we can add that animation, let's go ahead and create our keyframes for the animation. So keyframes, and this loading image would of course be spinning. So let's name the animation as spin. And it's going to come from transform, rotate, and this we'll set it to just 0 degrees. We're just going to put in 0 degrees because it's going to be starting at that point, so we don't need to rotate it in any way. And now it's going to transform again, rotate. And of course, because this will be spinning, it's going to rotate a total of 360 degrees. Okay. So now in our spinner image, we're going to apply the animation because now we have our keyframes. And inside this animation property, we're going to first put in the keyframes for the animation. And this will occur for 1 second. And it will be linear, which means that we are animating it at a constant pace. So it will just have the same pace throughout its rotation. And we're also going to set it to infinite so that it loops. And let's see if that actually spins. There we go. Now we have our loading spinner that is spinning infinitely right. Okay, so you can create your own spinners on your websites, and you can even apply these animation concepts to your websites to make it look more interesting and dynamic. And I hope you guys learned more about animations in this tutorial, and I'll see you again in this next one.